Well, good evening. As I said, tonight is not like any other night. In fact, this service is different than many of the services that we do. We're around round tables for one. We gather in the evening for another. It's a great opportunity to pause and to reflect and to enter deeply into a gift that Jesus gave to us on the last night of his life. And so every first Sunday of the month, we gather around the Lord's table. Looks a lot like this here, for Holy Communion. And we remember in that moment the saving act of God in Jesus Christ and what he did for us to save us and to give us new life. Well, what we don't often think about on a usual Sunday communion is that communion is set in a broader story. It's set in the context of the Passover meal, a meal that Jesus would have celebrated with his disciples or celebrated himself every year of his life, and that he would have celebrated with his disciples several times before he went to the cross. And what's so significant about this, what we call the Last Supper, because it was indeed the Last Supper that Jesus ate and enjoyed with his followers, we see that Jesus interpreted this familiar ritual in a very, very different way. Now, we know that it got the disciples' attention because the events of this very familiar meal that had been eaten since the Hebrews were delivered from slavery in Egypt up until even the present day, those details aren't very clear in Scripture. In fact, we see just with the stroke of a pen, metaphorically speaking, that it was just business as usual as far as the Passover meal was concerned. But what the church remembered and what we see in the Gospels is they remember exactly the things that Jesus did that were out of the ordinary. And there were three things that were different from the ritual. The first was that during the meal, after the story of deliverance was told, people believe, Jesus got up from his place at the head of the table as host, took off his outer garment, tied a towel around his waist, and began to wash his disciples' feet. Now, John spills a lot of letters in the gospel accounting for this event because it must have been so mind-blowing for the disciples to think, here's Jesus, the host, who has now become the servant. This is Jesus, the one that they knew when the gospel was written, had given his life on the cross and had risen again, that humbled himself completely and took on the role of a servant. And in that moment, Jesus gave a new commandment. That's the word Maundy from Maundy Thursday. It comes from a Latin word meaning mandatum, which means commandment. He said, a new commandment I give to you. Love one another as I have loved you. I've given you this example in serving. The host has become the servant. And so in the first deviation of the ritual that we're going to actually enact tonight, we remembered Jesus wants us to assume the role of the servant. He wants us to follow him, to leave our places of honor, and to go and literally wash the world off of other people. Now, this is very interesting in our day and age because the world almost shapes us, forms us to stand at a distance and to judge, to have an opinion, to point fingers. But Jesus' way is coming down from lofty places of honor and getting down and touching dirty, smelly feet and washing the world off of our neighbors, even those who would betray us, even those who would deny us. That's the first gift that we get in the way that Jesus changed the familiar ritual of the Passover meal. The second is that in the middle of the meal, when the third cup of wine would be poured, the cup of redemption, and the afikomen, a symbol of the temple, would be consumed, Jesus veered from the Passover, and he took the afikomen, he prayed to God, he took, blessed, broke, and gave it to his disciples, and he said, take, eat. This is my body which is given for you. And we know in that moment the disciples, like the needle was pulled off the record, and they went, what? Right? Because this was so different. He's going, what do you mean? This is the Passover bread. This is a symbol of the temple. This is the symbol of things yet to come. What do you mean this is your body given for us? And it would be only after the cross and the resurrection that they would fully understand what Jesus meant. The second part of this is that he took the third cup, the cup of redemption, and after he had blessed it, he gave it to his disciples, and he said the words that are so familiar to us today, drink from this, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant poured out for you and for many. This cup of redemption. And so Jesus used these familiar symbols in their eyes to help them remember every time that they came to the table what Jesus had done for them and to make Jesus' life and death and resurrection a part of their lives as well. The third deviation from the ritual that's noted in the Gospels is that Jesus and his disciples didn't finish the Passover ritual before they left for the Garden of Gethsemane. They just got up at a time when psalms would be read and hymns would be sung, at a time that they would look forward to the prophet Elijah coming back, the hope that they had in the Messiah coming. That's when Jesus left to become the Messiah. And the church remembered that because it was so profound and so amazing at the time that it occurred. And so tonight, we celebrate the Passover as it's been celebrated throughout many generations, but we're going to deviate from the usual ritual in the places that we believe that Jesus did so that you can see what we celebrate as Holy Communion on our first Sundays here in the context of the Passover meal. We've got several elements here to enjoy this year. We've got the Passover plates on your tables. You're going to get to actually sample the foods together. Now, that would be a part of the Passover Seder meal. You'll see on your placemats the description of what each food symbolizes, and I hope we'll give you some time to read over that and to reflect on that tonight. We're going to have time for some table conversation. We're going to have some surprise interaction around the tables. We're going to wash each other's feet tonight, and we've got an easy way to do that. Don't be weirded out. It's going to be awkward for all of us equally, and you'll leave changed by it, I know. And after the Passover meal tonight, we're going to read the story of Jesus' abandonment and arrest in the garden before we go. So it's going to be an awesome night together, and I invite you to join me in preparing our hearts to enter into this mystery once again.